And here we are, 28 years later. Well, not really. It's only been a week since we last got together on a live stream, but we're talking about 28 years later, the latest film from the genre powerhouse duo of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. Now, 23 years ago, they unleashed upon the world 28 days later. And 5 years after that was 28 weeks later. Then now there's been a significant time jump. And we're talking about a sequel that takes place almost 3 decades in story time and in real time, it feels like, from the original story. So we're going to get into big spoilerific detail. I've got the banner going down below just in case we start running our mouths too early. But before we get into all of that, I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. I'm happy to welcome Earth's Mightiest Critics, including Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists, Dave Canfield, a.k.a. the Creature Feature Preacher, Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree, and Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front herself. We may have another guest joining us, but we'll see how that all unfolds. But gang, this movie, been kind of divisive amongst the fandom. Didn't do spectacularly at the box office this past weekend, and given what's coming out soon, I don't know what its prospects are. Mike, you were the one who had informed me, I think the day of the screening, that it was set up to be the first part of a new trilogy, 28, however they're going to work that. So I didn't know. I thought it was just going to be like a capstone to the existing trilogy. But no, this is supposed to be a gateway into a whole new story. It'll be interesting to see if that in fact happens, depending on how this movie does, how it comes out in the wash. I felt like I had to eat my hat a little bit because I respect Boyle and Garland a lot. And even though they did make, a sequel in 28 weeks later, I figured, well, they're going to do something kind of classy. They're going to have something to say and really, put a nice little button on this series and not go for the cynical, let's franchise everything. But no, we're gonna go for the new trilogy and franchise everything.
Yeah, the sequel's name is already kind of silly. It's called like the Bone Tower or something like that.
I think it's the Bone Temple.
Yeah.
And I believe that one is being directed by Nia DaCosta. Candyman remake.
Yeah, Candyman. Fame. The Marvels never happened, but yeah, Candyman is fantastic. Yeah.
That is certainly opinion. But and I'm not sure who's coming back for the third movie again, if it does indeed happen. But I'm getting this weird Disney Star Wars vibe where they're going to have this kind of like different series of creators. Hopefully, they're at least all talking to each other, so there's a streamlined plan for where the story is going to go. And based on how. What's that?
Sorry, no, there is a bit of a Force Awakens element I feel like they're putting into the next one with the return of a certain actor. But yeah.
I had heard it was all completely filmed at this point.
It is.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They filmed both at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, at least 1 and 2. 3, not that I'm aware of, so we'll see if that's even going to happen.
So 3 will be the Nia DaCosta one.
No, 2's the Nia DaCosta one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which one does Luke find out he's Leia's sister in? That's the main thing.
I don't know.
Great.
I think they should get Mel Brooks to do the third one and call it History of the Bone Temple Part 3.
I kind of
now I'm sitting in the temple and I'm looking at the skulls, wondering why I didn't build myself a better home.
I kind of thought this movie had plenty of Bone Temple in it. I don't know.
That's the weird thing. Is it going to be more about the Doctor character? I don't know. But before we get into the Doctor, because who is the Doctor? What are we talking about here? Jeff, would you be so kind as to synopsize 28 years later, if you in fact can, because that's a chore. I'm sorry.
Well, the good news is, despite the sort of vastness of the scale and sort of the violence and such, and even the time period with many years covered, it's a fairly simple story in many respects, and that is it concentrates on 3 people who have survived and are making their life on a little isle off of the mainland that they can get to and fro from via this causeway, and they are a family that has Jamie, who is assigned to be a scavenger in the small band of survivors who have been able to make it all these decades by basically sort of being away out of harm's way because of the water separating them, almost a moat, if you will.
And sorry, not to interrupt, but I don't know.
Sure.
I might have missed it, but I just want to set the table. This is the mainland is Britain.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Did I not say that? I meant to say that. Yeah, the mainland is
I might
England.
have missed.
Yeah,
I
sure.
might have missed it if you
Yeah,
had.
I probably didn't say it. So yeah, it's it's a small island that it connects them to the mainland of England, and they have a causeway there, and it concentrates on really three people, sort of who are sort of the main characters in this. They are Jamie, who's signed to be a scavenger, one of the sort of people who gathers wood and other things that they need, oftentimes from the mainland, which is dangerous. So he's a very brave sort, very macho. And then his wife, Isla, who is got some sort of unknown illness, and she's sort of bedridden most of the time and seems a little bit rash and maybe a little bit out of her mind, and yet she's not really dying or anything that they can see, really, that she's just been this sort of sick person for a long time, and they don't have a doctor that can treat that sort of thing on their little isle. And then their 12-year-old son, Spike, who is getting to the point where they want him to do more and sort of become a scavenger like his dad. And then Jamie and Spike decide to test that out and give Spike his first sort of taste of becoming adult as far as the responsibilities go. And the two of them trek over across the causeway to the mainland to sort of see what the lay of the land is, to get some supplies, and they run into some of the ragers, and from there on the story gets to be more dramatic until eventually Jamie, who wants to sort of save his mother and hears tell of this famous doctor who's existing somehow in the mainland, thinking that maybe that doctor could somehow help his mother, or at least diagnose what's going wrong, what's going on with her, and be able to help her. And then that doctor's name is Kelson, and that's the kind of the core of the story. And I hope that's enough to start us off.
No, that's great. That does set the stage. So thank you.
Sure. Very good.
Oh, thank you.
The movie opens, essentially at the beginning of the outbreak in 2002. You've got a bunch of kids watching the Teletubbies, and all of a sudden, the infected burst into the room. I think there's a mother character who says basically like, "Don't leave this room." It's basically a little boy. I think the rest of them are all girls, if I'm not mistaken. But
they're all his sisters.
Are they all sisters? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I didn't get that.
I just got that from looking at the IMDb when it's like Jimmy's sister, Jimmy's sister, Jimmy's sister. I'm like, damn, all 6 of his sisters, huh? Way to go, kid.
Yeah. Well, so he gets ordered to stay put, and don't open that door for anybody. But he goes and opens the door and essentially lets in a horde of the infected who make quick work of ripping those little girls apart. Fortunately, we don't really see that on screen. But he escapes and runs to a church where he finds. I was a little confused because I'm not sure exactly what denomination we're talking about, but I don't know if that guy, the priest, was his father or just the father.
He was his father.
I think it's his
Okay.
father. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And Dad is a doomsday prophet of sorts because he's welcoming the infected to come in and take him because he believes that these are the end times. And little Jimmy runs and hides, and he runs away as Dad's being ripped to shreds. And we get a very classy shot of zombies destroying a Catholic church, and then, or whatever denomination it is again, and then Jimmy running away, and everything kind of goes to black except for the swinging upside down cross that he's wearing that shines gold. And right off the bat, I'm like, I don't like where this is going, because I feel like this is another one of those issues where movies where the director is working out his issues on me at the expense of my entertainment. However, as things go along, we cut 2 years later, as we mentioned, on this little island, and we meet Jamie. Now, hold on 1 second. I think we have another guest. Mark,
There he is.
the movie man Kronchak, welcome.
Sorry, I am late. We finished up an interview, but I wanted to try to make it. So thank you for allowing me to sneak in the back door.
No worries. Thank you. I just hope you haven't been sitting there too long. I just noticed that you were in there and I didn't hear the little bleep.
It's all good. It's all good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we're just kind of going through. Jeff gave us a lovely synopsis, and we're kind of going through the beginning of the film. Now, I want to begin with a question. Am I the only one who was very confused by the fact that we have Jimmy, the little boy in the beginning, and then later we have Jamie, who is Aaron Taylor Johnson's character on this island. Because of the thick accents in this movie, I thought that they were the same person. And I was under the impression during the entire film that what we were watching was a sort of father-son failed redemption arc where Jamie was trying to raise his young son, Spike, in a way that his father never raised him, which I figured out at the very end, which we'll get to. And that was yet another kind of crushing disappointment that, I've been basically following headcanon for 2 hours. The real story is much worse than I could have imagined. So, yeah, I'll put my hand up there. My name is Ian, and I fell for my own nonsense. Did anyone else have that thought?
No.
I
would
kept
say,
waiting. Go ahead,
Jeff.
Well, I was just going to say, I sat next to you, Ian, for the film, and I felt a little of the vibe coming off on you, getting into my head as well. I thought that since they were starting with such a specific family, following the kid to the church and then him escaping, that character was going to somehow be part of this. But then I did notice that it was a different name, so I kind of let it go. But for the first couple of minutes, I was waiting for him to show up, and then maybe he's the expert in the village, like, well, I know it because I was there firsthand and saw what they did and blah blah blah. But that never materialized, so I kind of let it go as the news story got going underway. But it is a little bit unfortunate that they had the name so close,
especially because you're talking about these English accents. So it's like there's a very fine line between Jimmy and Jimmy. I'm sorry.
You can't tell the difference. Yeah, heathen. What is it? You're such
Sorry.
an American.
Sorry.
It's a little silly.
and they're
how
never
the
Jane,
characters-
always Jimmy. Like everybody's friendly.
I would
Yeah.
say that before we hear the name, I was with you, Ian, at first. I'm like, we're opening with these little historical moment with the character, and then we come back, you cut to the shot, and then here you've got the older, and you're like, that's the older version of the character. But then we didn't get the cliched shot of the necklace at any point of the cross. So that made me realize, no, that's not him. Because if it was him, we would have had within the first minute a shot of the cross or him holding the cross or reflecting, and that's why we had the flashback normally, but we didn't have that. So I didn't feel it was him, but it's interesting as we met characters. I'm like, wait, no, this is going to be Jimmy. And it's like, no, I'm like, no, wait, that's going to be Jimmy. No. And then, we don't discover how that plays out to the end. And while I like bookends, that was one of the issues that I had with it. I didn't know that they were doing a sequel, but I didn't.
We talked about the fact that this is kind of a trilogy, a new trilogy starting up, and that was another thing I had no idea about until I think the day that I watched it.
But I didn't need to. And I had a good friend, my good friend Derek Carey. We had a discussion. He loved this film. He thought it was just fantastic. Me, I enjoyed it, but all along the way there were certain, as I call them, dangling participles, of the plot, to where I'm like, okay, you guys are setting up for a sequel, aren't you? As I was watching the film, because I've watched so many, and then when we get, to the resolution of everything, I'm like, because they have me in very large chunks of this film. They have me, and then you hit a moment where you're like, that's sequel bait there. Yeah. That's a sequel plot there. This isn't going to come into play until next time, and that took me just a little bit away, because outside of that, I was digging this film.
I got to say, the whole Jimmy thing is really interesting, because the real question we all have is whether they sort of jimmied Jimmy into there, on how they did it. I think that, yes, we do assume that Aaron Johnson is the kid and that he's gone on and had his own family. Or at least, I did, my partner did, my podcast partner, Mike. But I think that a really interesting thing in this movie with the word Jimmy is we see it in a couple other places. And as the movie goes, we see it linked to religious versifications on walls, graffiti and stuff. And then we meet a person named Jimmy. And it has since come out exactly who that is a representation of. And of course, all of his followers are called Jimmy.
Right. Mhm.
So this is setting up something really, really dark. And it's also doing something really interesting, I think. It's separating out the notion of religion from faith, which I think is always just the thing. You know, like for me as a religious person, I grew up in the 80s and everybody complaining about the way that religion was portrayed in the media and why are the religious people always the bad guys? Well, guess what? Every day in fucking America, they arrest somebody who's a pastor for molesting kids or something. I have grown up realizing, you know, there's a big difference between acting and believing and having faith and wearing a title, having everybody call you Jimmy. And I think that this is a movie where you see his family, this kid's ersatz family, and you don't realize it's ersatz till the end. But by that point, you don't really care because the relationships are established and you're wondering where they're going to take it later.
Yeah, I mean, I think my issue with the whole religion thing, because I don't care, that's between Garland and Boyle and their God, but it's just so, as you mentioned, Canfield, I'll acknowledge that the church and various religious organizations do have their problems with scandals, but there's also the flip side that nobody talks about, which is that religion can be very positive and very helpful to people. And yet here we have another horror movie where religion is the bad guy. I'm like, come up with something new, come up with a different angle, and don't just like have it out there to piss off an entire category of people that are not going to bother watching your film.
I'm gonna challenge that later, but I have a challenge for that.
Well, let's talk about it now, because as I mentioned, we're gonna get out of here by 9. We have a hard out.
All right.
So let's just put it on the table.
So we meet Dr. Kessel, right? And Dr. Kessel has died. Ralph Ray Fiennes is brilliant in this role as kind of an almost Mad Maxian kind of eccentric character. And he's building all of these pillars out of human remains. Everyone else on the island thinks he's nuts. He has dove into the absolute depths of what it means to be a human being. I am going to memorialize and speak to the importance of the mortal lives of these people. And I read a thing today from somebody, I can't remember who wrote the review, but basically they were saying that, well, yeah, but why didn't they have crosses on their graves? That would have been a positive Christian thing because it means that you're defeating death. And I say no, because no matter what you do in that situation, you are not in that grave. You have not moved on. You are sitting here trying to figure out how things are going on. That to me is a much better representation of faith in the face of death than anything else. And we need to talk about how religion is twisted, because otherwise we wind up at the prey of people like this Jimmy guy at the end of the film.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, first of all, you're kind of introducing this element into this universe, but the movie isn't really about that. It becomes... It's a theme that dances at the edges and becomes much more pronounced at the end. I agree. I think the whole Kelson thing is really beautiful, and I think a counter to what is going on, certainly the opening of the movie. But you said it right there, talking about how religion is twisting faith and everything. That is true for some people, and for other people, it is a font of nourishment and community and a place to harvest your spirituality.
I just don't know that the church does faith any better than the average person. And that's been a huge revelation for me.
I mean, I don't want to get into an entire theological discussion. I'm just saying that it is
We'll move on.
In genre films, I'm just tired of, hey, we need a boogeyman that we're going to make a religion. There's nothing redeemable about it. There's never anything shown as a positive light. It's always this cliche of like, look, they're probably touching kids and, God is dead. And it's just so tiresome. And unless you have something new to say, I just don't want to encounter it anymore. Now, unfortunately, I'm a big genre fan, so it's going to be the albatross to wear across my neck until I encounter a filmmaker who's got some good ideas. But you mentioned the real life inspiration for Jimmy and the setup for the sequel. We'll get to that. We are going to circle back around to that ending. But I do want to talk about some of the positives in the film, because this is a real roller coaster for me, because there were moments like that opening. I was like, I don't know about this. I loved the relationship between Jamie and Spike at the beginning, going out into the island, the hunt. We learn more about the ecosystem and the different types of these infected that evolved over the last 3 decades. They set up as they're leaving, the guardsmen at the gate. They're like, look, you go out there and you come back or you don't. We're not sending people on a search party. This is a one-way ticket if you get into trouble. And so, of course, you think, okay, the entire plot of the movie is father and son get stuck on the island and have to fight their way out. That's not what happens. They come back. There's a big party. Spike realizes, oh, dad's been, sleeping around on mom. And then he doesn't get a chance to kind of explain or have like kind of a heartfelt conversation. They just kind of get in each other's business. And Spike decides, hey, dad's no help. I'm going to take mom to the mainland to get help from this doctor that everyone says is crazy. And then that journey back to the mainland, they encounter a member of the Swedish Navy who, along with a few of his compatriots, got stranded on the island when their ship kind of wrecked. They have to fight their way out. Only one guy makes it out, and he encounters through, I'm going to call it sloppy. It feels like there were 6 or 7 scenes that were cut out of this movie, and then like the 8th version of each of these plot lines was pasted in at the most awkward moments. Like when we first meet this crew, they're like in this, I don't know if it's a sewer or something, but they get cornered, and I think that's where we meet the alpha, or at least we see what the alpha version of this infected can do. He's ripping heads out on spines, which is again very predatory. Not the Jimmy kind of Predator, which we'll talk about later, but the movie Predator, right? And it just becomes like different kinds of movies, and I'm straining at the edges. I'm like, where is this personal father-son relationship that I was coming to enjoy? Now we've got this wisecracking Swede. Oh, wait, now he's dead. Hey, look, we've got an infected lady who's about to give birth, and we're going to go through that whole thing because no one learned the lesson of Zack Snyder from 2004. And then she's dead, and now there's 3 people or 2 people really carrying a baby, and they go to the doctor, and now the doctor's getting attacked, and but there's a lovely scene involving the doctor and teaching Spike about life and death and helping the mom transition into the afterlife because she has cancer. They don't have the ability to treat, much less specifically diagnose what's going on, but she's gradually, increasingly losing her senses. And it's a very humane and beautiful climax of the movie. At the very end, Spike decides, I'm not going back to the mainland. The island. I'm going to stay here on the mainland and fend for myself. He delivers the baby back, somehow places it at the front door of this fortress. And then Dad, who has been sitting there for however many days, I guess, wait, now I know they established, has it been 1 day, this entire thing?
It's only, yeah.
Yeah, they come back, they have the party. Spike finds out that there's a doctor, that fire in the distance was a doctor. He all of a sudden goes from, I'm shitting my pants being on the mainland to, you know what? I really don't know anything but that farmhouse and a little bit, but Mom, let's go find that doctor that I saw for 2 minutes in the distance and I got you covered. They go on the mainland. They are there that night. The mom takes care of the worm eating thing. And then the next day they find the Swede. He comes, he's gone. They find the doctor. The doctor diagnoses what seemed rather quickly. And I'm very surprised that there's no one. I get you don't have a doctor, but there should have been some sort of medical prowess if you can birth so many babies that are on that community, that you would have figured out something that's going on with that woman. He tells her what it is. Then it's night. Spike is drugged, and then it's the next day, and all of a sudden the alpha comes out at the doctor again. It's like, Spike, let's get you out of here. Yeah. So
I think you're right. Well, thank you for synopsizing that and helping me recollect. I think my issue is that it's pretty much like an episode of 24 where you're watching it and you're like, oh, there is so much going on. This must be like the course of 6 weeks. Jack Bauer's daughter encountered a cougar, I think 3 times in one season, which is actually 3 times in 12 hours. And you're like, wait, what? So yeah, there's a lot going on here, but regardless, he goes back, delivers the baby, makes it back to the mainland, and then that's when he encounters more infected, and that's when he encounters Jimmy and his gang. Yeah, it's, I don't know.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, please, Jeff.
Well, I want to first of all compliment Katie for that concise. I almost could sit the rest of the half hour out because she just said all the problems that I had with the movie. In fact, Dave and I briefly talked last night when we were seeing the critic screen of Megan 2.0, and I said I was mixed on it. And I think it's kind of funny because in this first half hour, Ian, you've managed to say all the stuff I liked about it, and Katie said all the stuff I didn't like about it. But I do want to get to the bigger picture of sort of how they both convalesce into this movie, and maybe an overarching theme that I know I have, and I'm sure everybody here is a little bit tired of me saying these kind of things, but I think it's a problem with storytelling. I think it's a big problem in horror. And I know we're all horror buffs here, so I'm going to say this. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. How's that for another theme? Okay. This film is so well directed. It's got incredible production values. It's all outside on location. Danny Boyle knows how to make tension out of people breathing, and some of the skip edits he's doing, and the novelty of Alex Garland's script where these zombies can go fast and all that kind of stuff. Great. It was great the first film. It was pretty good in the second film, and it's a great premise. A lot of good actors in here. Jodie Comer gives a very difficult performance, and she manages to make you care about her, even though I would have left her back home. As Katie said, it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to take this crazy woman out, and I don't even know how to shoot my arrows when these things are coming upon me fast and furious, but let's drag her around, because it's like, dragging a dead cat up and down the fairway. What bothers me is that a great writer like Alex Garland, who's written some of the smartest sci-fi horror in the last 30 years, as well as Danny Boyle, who's directed incredible films, they, to me, didn't look at this script as hard as they could. And I'm not saying that these are necessarily deal breakers in the sense that you can't enjoy this movie or find terrific things to join it. But there's plot holes in here that, that needed to be closed up, and they didn't. And I just question why that stuff doesn't get. You've got literally 2 years before you even start to produce this and roll cameras, and nobody says, hey, those ragers are all naked, and it gets very cold in the UK, and they don't have anything to eat because the population isn't around. How are they surviving? Bone and flesh, even if it's raging from a virus, deteriorates in 30
to look
years.
At them, you'd never know it was cold.
Exactly. I mean, especially that big galoot. My God, he was.
I got warm.
Look, the alpha third leg was a character in and of itself. Wow.
Oh no.
But then I also am begging other questions, like, they put up a scant 1 or 2 titles at the beginning. It's like, now wait a minute. We're telling this film 20 years later. It's like, okay, you've got a Swedish army, and then they've got a modern cell phone that they're losing the battery life on. It's like, wait a minute, if we've got this worldwide plague, or maybe it's not a plague, and then how does the people who are isolated in this island not get saved from all this? Like, they couldn't get somehow some bombs to just take out the UK where these ragers are, or at least scorched earth or something, and then go in and save these people, and then sort of just isolate the island of England. I don't know how far this plague
Trump
is
was
gone.
still president, so
well, maybe that's it, Dave.
Well,
maybe
no,
that's
that was
it. But I mean, the fact
2002. That's a
but
completely
the fact
different
is,
timeline.
I think filmmakers like this, when they're telling a premise of a story like this that has to basically hinge on whether or not we buy this, need to help us buy it. And my biggest problem is I kept being taken out of the film through the whole thing. Is like, wait a minute, is the whole world like this? Because that's how it is in The Walking Dead, and I get it. There's pockets of humanity that survive. But here it's like, what's going on here? Why are there cell phones? Why is this? Why do they even go to the mainland? Why are these ragers still alive? They're up against the elements. It needs a little more logic. And I'm not being like Mr. Technicality here per se.
You can just call me by name, Jeff. It's okay.
But physics are physics, okay? And you need a certain amount of suspended disbelief for these, but you also need a certain amount of grounding. And I'm not saying they couldn't have done this rather easily. I think they could have, but it's not in the film, and I think it's confounding.
They needed some elements. I mean, you're looking at a modern world, yes. And I think right there, for me, being the genre guy, I was having flashbacks to Escape from New York and Escape from LA. The minute they said, oh, we reduced it down to Britain being quarantined off.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that was the first disappointment for me that they did that, because if you look at the way the series went, it felt like it was going to be naturally progressed to how humanity 28 years later is dealing with the global pandemic of the zombie rager outbreak. But we don't get that. We get this kind of summary of Escape from New York. And like, okay, so it's set in modern times. We don't have any evidence. And it's weird because Alex Garland and them usually are really good at world building with very little. And they don't build the world good enough in this for me to believe, because you don't have, like, say, as some people would call it, bleeding hearts of any kind trying to get to Britain to find out if there's survivors to rescue them. You don't have someone dropping air supplies. I mean, if we're in the modern times and the rest of the world is
you'd have satellites that could figure out that there's still people alive there and that they need to isolate the ragers here, and this is where you bomb them. That stuff isn't impossible anymore. We just know that from this last week with the bombs and all that kind of stuff. They should have written that into this story, and then we're on board. But until then, it's like, wait a minute, you're acting like you're still analog here, and we're far past that.
Well, Mark,
I would have
real quick. I just want to ask a question. When you're talking about them dropping in air supply, is that like a benefit concert for the infected? Because I'd be all over it.
That's what I was hoping for.
I was hoping
be their headliner.
I think,
my God.
On one hand, I get what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep you in the moment with the characters and their feeling of the whole world's given up on them. On the same hand, I would have liked to see a counter thing from the world, say a clip or a cut to a news broadcast of, countries in the UN debating on whether or not they should help Britain or let it just completely die, let the virus die. It needs some kind of counterpoint if you're setting it in a world to where Britain's the only place that's got the
30 years,
ragers.
Mark, those zombies would have been dead. They just didn't have enough food to eat. They would have died in the elements. I mean, they would have frozen. They're all nude. I'm sorry, but flesh and bone deteriorate. They act like they're the skeletal structure of Wolverine. I don't think so.
How did they wind up nude in the first place? Did their clothes just deteriorate after?
See, the clothes deteriorate, but flesh that just stays forever.
Right. Well, Katie, jump in here because I think I might have stepped on something you were saying earlier, so I apologize for that. What were you going to say?
No, well, I think it's funny, Mark, when you're talking about the bleeding hearts trying to help the islands. If you think about it, in 28 days later, it's the bleeding hearts that caused the whole thing in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
I know.
Bleeding
hearts were helping the animals and all that stuff, and I understand that. I actually think a number of the ragers that are the infected are the island are people who have been there trying to help out and have then become infected. Yes, there are a number of people who are naked. There's also the woman who is pregnant who has a dress on and is clothed. There would be no reason that she obviously was not born there. She obviously is. It's like if this had started when she would have been like 2. So there's no way. And I know some people said like, oh, well, the Ragers had sex and had this baby. Alex Garland would not write a story where violent rage machines are then causing sexual assault. I do not believe that. I believe
they'd even think about it.
Before
I don't think it's a priority to them.
Infected, and then she got infected, and that's how. Whatever happened with Samson and the all that stuff. But I think it's the fact that I had a major issue with the whole fact, as you were saying, with the starvation because of watching 28 Weeks Later and talking to someone last night. It does actually seem like you have 28 days later, and then they completely don't have 28 weeks later in this universe at all. So that, to me, I was like, okay, if we don't have that, I can kind of go along with some of this stuff, but still there is the fact that it's like, yeah, these people would have starved. The Ragers would have starved, but at the same time, when there are millions and millions of people who have died because of this thing and they can quarantine it, and then anyone who gets off the island, they're probably going to shoot them, or they have the people who are, the different countries who are like doing the surround to try and, monitor and make sure that nothing gets out. I mean, I can understand that. My thing is, I really needed closed captioning in the beginning. I love Aaron Taylor Johnson, but damn it all to hell, I'm really getting sick and tired of these movies where it's like I'm watching it and I'm just going like,
What are they saying?
I'm gonna figure what he said later, because I mean he is speaking English, but I have no freaking clue what he just said.
I think all movies should be made in Welsh.
I know.
Yeah, we get used to watching it with closed caption at home too, because
there were so many times that I did not understand what was going on, or what they were saying and stuff like that. I love the community. I love that you don't have this like big leadership and people, you know, trying to be like the mayor of Jaws and all that stuff. And it's like, well, you need to do this, but they're all working together. They teach their children from the get-go to work together. I think that's great and beautiful, and I love that they have that in the community, but I just feel like it's a huge negative that you can't, like I said, you can't tell me with all the children on that island that there is no one that would have been considered a doctor or some sort of healing nature. There are still books, even if they don't have Wi-Fi and stuff like that, and they can't WebMD some shit. There are still books, and there still would have been somebody who would have gone on with that. I know it's like, well, you know, here's a real doctor. We have to go where all the infected are.
These are the questions that a screenwriter asks. And it should have been asked for 2 years of pre-production. We are accepting this because, well, we're delivering the scares. What does it matter? It's a vibe. I'm so over the vibe of horror. Horror is not a vibe. Horror needs to be explained. It's got rules. It needs to be followed. And it doesn't take a lot to change this movie into what Katie is talking about that makes some sense.
I think if zombie apocalypse started tomorrow and you didn't know how it started, it might as well be the devil.
But we know how it started from 28.
Everybody or whatever.
We know it started from 28.
I just want to get this. I just want to get this out. I think we're being really super hard in this movie.
We are,
and I feel you because I have like a couple of questions about it too, in terms of the believability of certain things. But I also feel like a lot of what's been said here, I saw that in the movie there were explanations for that. And
well, then help us out here, Dave, because
I guess
tell me where they were. The whole episode will be nothing but us talking about it.
Well, no,
but that's a major problem with the film. It's the one that's getting its. That's the one that people are raging about all online now. Is that they didn't do their job to explain this world. The whole world is dependent upon this logic, and there's no logic to this world. It's just a bunch of cheap scares that are cheap because there isn't any logic behind them.
Okay, well,
are there really scares? Was anyone really scared of it? This to me was like the least
jump scares,
but
there's jumps. I'm just saying, Katie, the jump scares. You know, anytime somebody comes within distance, you know, you're trying to deliver the baby. Is the baby going to come out crazy and rageful? I mean, I'm not saying there was a lot of scares in here, but there are scares. But they're designed to, you know, do the stuff that horror movies do. But I just think this is the first movie, and the stuff from these filmmakers are smarter than this. And for some reason, they check their brain at the door here, maybe because they're being like the ragers. But I'd love to hear what Dave said, because that kept me out of the movie, because I kept watching this going, this doesn't make sense.
Let's let Dave jump in then.
Well, here would be the thing. I think it is perfectly fine. There are always going to be different reactions to film. I have no problem with that. I think that many people, when they see a movie, they are really bothered by what they feel are logical lapses, or, you know, in other words, it doesn't take too much for them to go, I'm done with this movie. And I thought that this movie had enough in it that I still want to think about it. I want to watch it again. I'm interested in the fact that they want to take the infected into sort of a new place where we begin to question their savagery and maybe humanize them more and understand them more in a human light. And I think that's a lot of what this movie is about in general. And I think that it's real urgent and it's real now. And I think that it, you know, it's just like that thing that, I mean, the bad example is like, say, something like Jurassic Park, right? Where Jurassic Park, obviously the science is stupid in Jurassic Park past a certain point, but we all love to watch dinosaurs jump on things and jump on people. I think this is a movie that does that, and it has some ideas in it, and I didn't mind it. And I also, I do think that if I got into trying to like Katie, for instance, yeah, there's a lot of babies on the island. There are also a lot of crosses that woman points to.
Crosses.
And I mean, I saw at least 50.
Oh yeah, there's the little graveyard that's right next to the gate
right
of the
by
people who
beach,
didn't come
yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And so my point with that is, I could see how people been given birth to babies for thousands of years before we had doctors. So I mean, it's stuff like that where I kind of go, okay, I was cool with that. The fact that they're naked. To be honest, it never occurred to me to care. And I'm not saying it's wrong to care. That's the one thing I want to get across. I think we're talking about two different reactions to the film. And I think there's people out there with my reaction as well. And I don't want to dissuade them from seeing this film because I think they'll get a lot out of it.
Well, I think one thing I always want to encourage is to go in paying hardcore attention to any film that you watch, whether it's a genre film or Oscar bait or whatever, because, and this is a discussion I've had on Mark's show very recently, the reason it's good to pick these things out is because there are filmmakers working within the genre who don't make these mistakes. And it's the difference in quality between an Alex Garland script like Ex Machina and then this. This movie, to Katie's point, destroys the continuity of the series in the opening title card. Because it says, in 2002, the rage virus got out, and then it was, I think the last line was, it was contained and did not make it to the mainland, which is not what we saw at the end of 28 weeks later, which the whole ending scare was, hey, look, it's in Paris, which last I checked was mainland Europe.
Which
so
Alex Garland said they nuked, and that's how they prevented it. But I'm like, we didn't see it on screen though, so that's just an excuse.
Well, wait, did he say that, or was that in the movie?
He said
continuity?
it in an interview.
Well, that doesn't count at all.
I know exactly. That's the point.
Well,
you didn't put it in the movie. How are people going to know it got nuked and they stopped the spread?
I'm gonna
see. Dave is very right.
Oh
Dave is
God.
right. This is modern. We have to watch all the internet and online stuff to figure out what the basic story is.
And the comics
That's
and
so
I love
today.
you
the
guys.
webtoon.
Ian, I adore you so much. Like, well, that doesn't count. Who cares? Like an interview off screen, not on the that wasn't in the theater I was watching. They didn't have that. Like,
trust me, I've had that
funny.
discussion. I've had the discussion with Ian too, because I have an overactive imagination, and a lot of times when I watch films, I tend to fill in the blanks. I know what Dave is talking about, and there are some of the elements that didn't bug me. The new, everybody being naked. I'm like, okay, and that I think it's one of those two where if this was the first film in the series, I don't think it might have bugged people as much, because you didn't have what was established. Part of the appeal that I've seen a lot of people had with 28 Days Later, and what struck them with that and 28 Weeks Later, was because those were solid zombie infected stories that were taking familiar tropes and such and just presenting it in a new way. But the scripts were fairly tight because they were a little bit of smaller scale, but they built out just enough for you to not have room for those questions. And in here, in all honesty, the parts that I love best about it, and I'm a horror guy, were not the horror parts.
Yeah.
I think they're best parts, and I honestly will think that they were actually intending, probably to your point, Jeff, 2 years prior, wanting to make an infected story that had very little infected in it, because it's 28 years later. They established how decrepit these things are, kind of a later years of Walking Dead. Now, I fell out of those series after the war, so I don't follow it too much, but I caught up on summaries. But other zombie stories, when you do that far of a time frame later, a lot of times it's no longer about the infected or the zombies, because they have, as Jeff said, they've deteriorated. They've gone, you've got pockets, but for the most part, they're done. And it's about how is humanity dealing with basically having the reset button and having to start over. And those are the parts in this film that I love. people say Ralph Fiennes in here was wasted. I don't think so. I think
who's saying that?
I've seen some people. I've seen
And
some
it's
people say
it's Ray Fiennes.
Right.
or Ray Fiennes. Thank you, Ray Fiennes. I've seen some people say Fiennes was wasted or in the role he was in, and I'm like, I loved his bit when the kid got his mom there. That whole segment of why we had the bone towers and his approach to everything and his understanding of the infected that are. I mean, that whole section, I was all in. I'm like, oh, this is what I was hoping for to get out of here. Humanity reflecting on the fact that, man, first time around, we really screwed things up and we need to, do this. And his character, his doctor, having an understanding of both humans and the infected, I thought was a great bridge for him, understanding both and their behaviors. Mm-hmm. But it's the other elements in here that they threw in that kind of took me out. I didn't mind them, but I'm like, I almost didn't want those horror elements. I wanted to see this kid trekking across with his mom because kids are going to do impulsive things. He thinks he's going to man up. I have two boys of my own. I that attitude and him taking mom, not thinking of all the elements, just that felt natural to me.
Yeah, me too.
But it was when you get into the infected actually showing up, the alpha, the immaculate conception implications. This kid's probably going to have an immunity in the second film. I almost guarantee the
Which
baby's
they already
going to
dealt
play
with in 28 weeks later. The idea of an immunity to the infected.
Or it's going to spread all over. But when the Isla was kissing the baby, then I was like, okay, well, then she doesn't have the carrier gene and all that. Then, but I'm glad you brought up Dr. Kelson because he is the only person in this film who treats the infected like humans. Yeah. Because he gives them names. He doesn't call them things or something like that. He's like, I call this one Samson. It's like, it's not like they're trying to be friends or anything like that, but he's actually seeing them as a person who has a disease and not this creature. I mean, yes, he's very frightened, but there was also the aspect, and this is one of those things, when the Swedish guy came in and then shot someone and Isla had blood all over her face, but then Spike was like, "What?" It's like that to me was one of those. I'm like, okay, she's gonna get infected. Oh shit! And then she didn't. I'm like,
well, she should have because that's what got Brendan Gleeson in the
know.
first movie.
That's right. Don't world build, and then you don't respect the world because it's convenient not to.
Wait, what's that?
It's convenient not to.
Very overweight and out of shape. And clearly the alphas in this movie are symbolic. They are metaphors for the out of control male libido, which we are presented with as part of the coming of age story of Spike. Yes, his name is Spike. Could we get any more you-know-what than that? So I am only saying, I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm sorry. I will be quiet now.
No, here, Dave. I want you're touching on something. No pun intended. But all right, going back to what Jeff had said about the development of the script and coming way before the movie. I want to talk about the trailer for this film because the trailer is very, very misleading. They've got the scene they've got the quick cuts of like that freaky mask, like the flesh mask that's very elongated with the little whole mouth. And you kind of think, oh, this is going to be the savage cult leader who's, like in The Walking Dead, there's always like a faction that's going to go up against our heroes. But it's not. It's just a mask that's worn in the village by, kids standing around the hootenanny or whatever it is. You've got a lot of elements that are kind of implied and a lot of action and tension and horror in this movie. This movie is punctuated and, dribs and drabs by horror, but it is much more of a meditative kind of a journey film. And there is a great parallel between the father-son relationship and to what you're talking about, Dave, of the naming of the different, caring about the dead and the infected and recognizing their sovereignty as people. You don't have any of that in the beginning, and the villager forager clan, and it's understandable because they've been driven onto this island that they have to fortify by these things that are for all intents and purposes are no longer human. But then you've got another perspective of someone who has been sort of forced to live among them on the mainland, who has gone through hell, and now he's got his own way of dealing with things and coping with the world. And that's a great story. The problem is you've got all of this other horror tropey action movie nonsense in the middle. Whereas if you had just stripped all that out and had it be a very meditative, almost art film, that would have been awesome. And you can do that if this is the conclusion to the 28 trilogy. You can't do that if you're trying to head off or kick off a blockbuster horror franchise, which I think is where this movie fails. Now, we are coming up on time. So I do want to raise two more points. One, as far as the outside world goes, I think it would have been very interesting if 28 years later, if it really had been just contained to mainland Britain, what if the rest of the world kind of forgot about mainland Britain?
Right.
What if it became politically, it became Haiti? Yeah, terrible things happen there, but no one ever talks about it until there's some kind of a revolution that can't be ignored, or someone washes up on shore and says, hey, remember us.
Like everybody ignores what Gary, Indiana is.
What?
Have you ever been to
Michael
Gary?
Jackson?
No. Have you ever been to Gary?
No.
Drive there sometime and you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It is dilapidated to the point where you can't believe it. It looks like something out of a dystopian movie and nobody does anything about it. They've got these bombed out. They've got these bombed out sides of a hospital and a school and trees growing through the floors. And it's just nothing's done about it. And it's been that way for 30, 40 years. And it's like, I don't know how politicians run for governor, senator, and that, and they just ignore that and never say, we need to finally clean up Gary. They just leave it alone.
there are places in Michigan, Kentucky, there's these, and that's also a great thing that you can explore thematically if you wanted to make a movie about that.
Isolation and
isolation, forgetfulness, it's there's a lot of different directions you can go if you're interested in exploring ideas. I think this movie is interested in using ideas as springboards to kind of horror action, setting up the next movie, but not really getting into them. The worthwhile elements of this movie really, I think, can be boiled down to about 30 minutes out of the 2 hours or whatever it is. And the rest is pretty effective blockbuster horror storytelling if you don't care about a broader kind of philosophical vision. But I do want to say, Jimmy, Dave, to your point, it came out after this movie that the Jimmy character is and his entire parkour tracksuit ninja mafia that show up to help Spike defeat the infected at the end. I swear I was waiting for the Benny Hill theme to start playing.
Well, I just imagined Power Rangers playing because they had the little action figure of it and they're flipping off the rocks, like literally the way they would film the episodes. And
I thought they were going to start singing like Anna and the Apocalypse. I thought it was like going to be something like that.
I would not put it over Boyle and Garland or Nia DaCosta or anybody not to do exactly that. And that's not a new movie.
Okay, Katie, I'm going to ask you, do me a favor.
Mel Brooks, Mel Brooks.
Do not sully the brilliant music of Anna and the Apocalypse.
No,
by referencing it in comparison to this movie. I will not have it.
I love Anna and the Apocalypse. I have stood for that. But when I saw them coming out, it's like I thought it was like it reminded me of Soldier of War.
Yes.
It's like, and I'm like, what is going on here and stuff. Oh, but speaking of songs, does anyone miss that the score of 28 Days Later is not in this film at all?
Yeah, none of John Murphy. Well, John Murphy's music is in the, I think, somewhere near the very end of the film. It's the track when Cillian Murphy wakes up from the hospital and London's empty. Yeah, that's in there, like at the very end of the film. But yeah, the rest of it isn't in there. Like in the House of the Heartbeat, I'm glad they didn't replay because they replayed it like 8 times and 28 weeks later just to remind you it's a sequel to the first movie. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I liked about this film actually, and I gave it high praise. But I will say the plot holes are almost inignorable because, I mean, first off, one huge plot hole we didn't get to discuss is Spike is afraid of his dad. He slaps him. He thinks he's mistreating his mother. We got to get away from him. So he takes the baby that the infected just gave birth to and gives it to his father that he doesn't trust.
He puts it up. He puts it up for the village to take care of with a letter to his father.
Yeah.
So, But I mean but that's an entirely different thing, which I had started to mention. I got sidetracked, but the idea that Jamie, a character that we spend the first like almost half hour of the movie with, and his relationship with Spike, they kind of get out of it by saying, well, no one's going to come after you. There's a difference between some rando on the island not coming back from a mission and your son leaving with your wife to go out onto the island. He would be gearing up. He would be bullying other people to coming out with him on a rescue mission. That should have been the movie. You can have a wonderful confrontation with, discovering the secrets of Kelson. Maybe there's different points of view, especially because thematically that's what this movie has set up. It's a completely, squandered opportunity. Now, there had better be something very special going on in this sequel. And to Dave Canfield's point, very dark, because Jimmy, the character that we meet at the end of the film, it came out that he is based on Jimmy Savile. Mm-hmm. Now, Jimmy Savile was a very insanely popular British entertainer who died in, it was somewhat, in the last couple of decades. But after he passed away, it came out that he was, let's say, a huge fan of children's content. Let's just say he was not, he wasn't visiting many schools because of court orders, or he wouldn't have been if he'd been around when these allegations came out. But and so the idea that young Spike would come up against a gang or be sort of like invited into the protection of a gang or modeled off of Jimmy Savile portends very dark things indeed. Now, I'm going to see the sequel because that's what we do here, but I have less than zero interest in seeing more of this story, particularly the story that is set up at the end of this film. I feel like you would have a movie whose many faults I could forgive if you chopped it off with Spike narrating that letter saying, hey, Dad, take care of this girl, or have the village do it. I'm going to, figure things out on my own, just like you had to do, or something like that. And then it cuts. And that's the end of 28 years later. You can use all your headcanon imagination to say, okay, maybe this is how this part of the world starts over and, whatever. But they had to go and set this. It's like a post-credit sequence, but it's actually part of the film, so you can't really escape it. And I have no appetite for it. So let's quickly go to comments.
By the way, real quick, I think
Yes.
Spike was kind of a dick for setting the general store on fire. Like, you could have sent any inanimate thing on fire.
Yeah.
Setting this general store on fire, that's the one thing for the community. True asshole move.
Oh,
but, that's way to go, kid.
I thought you were, for a second, I thought you were talking about the gas station and that ridiculous whole scene.
Oh, no.
If we get down really low on the floor, maybe all this fire will stop exactly like 2 inches above our heads, and we won't suffocate on the fumes and the fire. And
never mind, it's in our lungs. Never mind, it's in our lungs.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, okay.
Science. Hashtag science. Yeah.
Hashtag science. All right.
So, Ian, what you're saying is it's coming back to the air supply.
Well, one of
yes, I'm all out of patience.
And you're all out of love.
You're all out of love and patience.
Yeah.
You know what? You are every woman in the world.
Every woman in the world.
I'm telling you right now.
Hey, I can wait forever.
I think, Dave, your enthusiasm for this movie is, dare I say, making love out of nothing at all.
Wow.
That wins the night. Okay, we're going to zip through these comments because we got to go. David Wilt says, in the original movie, when Jim wakes up from being long-term coma, finds himself alone in the world, it reminds me of the Twilight Zone pilot, Where is Everybody? Yes. Mm-hmm. The theme song in The House in a Heart is such a very suspenseful song because of the slow piano music. Yeah. The original movie changed the way people think of zombie movies because they were mostly stereotyped as being slow-moving creatures. That's true. Well, yeah, they're not. They are infected, and Alex Garland is in interviews, which are still not canon, but they kind of count. He's lamented these being called zombie films. 28 years later was masterful. I'm sorry, Illuminated Pro, you misspelled it. It's masturbatory. There's a B in there. Illuminated Pro says, "What's going on tonight?" You're
that Illuminati Pro? I just wondered if maybe he
Illuminati.
No, Illuminati. I love it
because they're running the world. That's why they don't care about England. The Rothschilds have moved out.
You can't spell uck without UK. Anyway, Miguel, hey Miguel, could have been a hell of a lot better, yes. And slap a different title on this movie, and it would improve it. Instead, it feels more like a spin-off of The Last of Us than have any resemblance to the original two movies. Yes, that's my point. This feels like a knockoff of the other two films, but it was made by the same people who
We
gave
didn't
us
even talk about that too. The fact that I think this movie suffers a little bit also because there are so many more sort of this subgenre that are out there now too that are still top of mind, still talked about. Last of Us is still a big hit on HBO, et cetera, et cetera. It has a number of things kind of working against it. All the more reason I think they should have been smarter about a lot of the stuff, because the stuff they do well, and like the Ray Fiennes character and then what he's saying at the end that Dave was talking about is, I think, very effective. In fact, to your point, Ian, it would have been better if the kid was going back to sort of carry on. Let's say Ray Fiennes' character dies and he's going to carry on doing what he did. I think that would have been a more feasible, sort of admirable, noble ending. Like he actually did learn something going over to the mainland, and it wasn't how to kill ragers. It was how to maybe appreciate all the people who have been lost to this plague and do the great work that the Ray Fiennes character was doing. Anyway,
I want to pick up on that in a second, Jeff, because that's an excellent point. Mike, do you have to go? I think because it's 9:00.
Let me see if I don't think they started the meeting yet.
Okay.
No.
If you need a duck, just go ahead and do that, because we're wrapping up. But there's a couple of threads here that I want to address. So do what you got to do. I apologize. But yeah, Jeff, I think that would have been an interesting character, or if he had just decided to stay back with, because Dr. Kelson sends him away,
right?
But if he had just said, "No, I'm staying here with you," or
helping out,
yeah, he could have been like the Yoda, like I want to train me like my father before me. That would have been a lot of fun and an interesting setup, especially if they are going to introduce Jimmy and those characters at the end.
Yeah,
what if they come to the camp? Or, because I feel like Kelson is going to show up in the sequel or maybe even the third movie or something, because he's still out there. I just want to see how that whole interaction plays out. Maybe. I said, I have no appetite for it, but I love that character anyway. Mark, go ahead.
That's an angle you could have done. Is you have the voiceover, you have the reading. He took the baby back because Kelson, told him to send the baby back. But then all of a sudden in the final shot, as you end with the end of the note, you have the doctor seeing Spike come back over the hill, and then you end it there. Then you do a post-credit sequence if you want to, with him doing something, being sent out by the doctor to do something, like covered in iodine or whatever, and he's trying to do something. And then he runs into Jimmy in a post-credit sequence, and then you
should have been a post-credit.
Yes.
So now you've still got your end coda. You've got this emotional arc for Spike of where he's going to go, and then you end up with this wild and crazy ending with the tracksuit guys saving him, and he's covered in iodine. And now you're like, oh shit, they're going to find the camp. They're going to do that. What's going to happen?
Well, here's the thing, Mark. I think if you had had the ending where you've got Spike coming back,
a nice twist. Yeah.
It's a great twist, but the problem is, I think if you had gone with scenario A, where you've got Spike coming over the hill to Kelson, maybe he presents him with a skull as some kind of like a totem. Then unfortunately the next movie would open with Kelson taking the skull and then throwing it over his shoulder and then turning and walking away.
Oh God! I will defend Last Jedi to the day I die. Okay.
Ian, can we end on one sort of serious note that kind of wraps up, I think, a little bit of
because this movie didn't end on a serious note.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to say, what I think is interesting is the discussion here has, I think, pointed to a number of strengths that could have been done better. I mean, ultimately, what you and I think everybody else was saying throughout this is this movie, by the nature of not only being a sequel, but it's about legacy, like what has been left. And I think if they had been left alone, sort of isolated by the world and basically abandoned, and then I think, Kelson talking about, honoring the dead and remembering them and all that, that's legacy too. And then who's the new people? What are they doing? Are they scavengers? Are they marauders, which is, I think, what they're sort of setting up at the end? Then you've got, I think, a sequel or a series or whatever you want that makes more sense, because this has sort of been about, okay, there was this crisis, this plague. We thought it got contained. It did in the UK, but somehow the rest of the world has moved on, and somehow the legacy of this place is gone, which I think is also important because history's forgotten, everything changes so quickly, et cetera, et cetera. Bigger themes that I think those two filmmakers were sort of getting around the edges, but they needed to land the plane, and I don't know if they did.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I am curious as to where this tracksuit Jimmy Mafia came from, because I don't know if they're mainlanders or could they have been from the outside world, and they, as we were kind of discussing, instead of like the humanitarians coming in like Katie was suggesting, another big nitpick is it's been almost 30 years. If the Jurassic Park / World franchise has taught us anything, there are always going to be some kind of a scientist or a corporation or a government who wants to bring these things back for study or harness it into a weapon. You would have
Alien is about all that.
Right. You would have had these excursions, have rival corporations or entities fighting over the infected, who gets to bring it back and destroy people, and had that be the big moral indignity of like, wait, you want to do what? Can't you see that we've been driven to this island from this once great nation? But yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities. Okay, so we are going to end. I promise. Miguel has a comment, second to last. Did not like the Power Rangers cameo at the end, though I understand the meaning. It didn't need to become a Guy Ritchie edit. Yes, indeed.
Good call, Guy Ritchie. Yeah.
Nice reference.
Again,
and he put a lot of people in tracksuits too in his films.
And
true.
Again, I think that lands better. I love zany stuff, and so part of me really enjoyed it. It just feels such an awkward shift from the rest of the film that it really needed to be mid-credit or end credit. Where you do the 28 days later, screen again at mid-credit or end credit, and then you have everybody going, oh, what's this? And so now you have this crazy zany section you can still do that implies some very dark things, but it puts enough space between it and the new story, the story you watched, where you're like, oh, I can enjoy this without having to go, what? Huh?
Yeah.
I did not enjoy that because I was not aware there was going to be a sequel. So then watching that, it was like, oh,
what is this?
Oh, this is okay. There's obviously going to be a sequel. Well,
I was so moved by that whole, pre-climax 20 minutes, or I guess climactic 20 minutes of what was going on with Spike and Ilsa and Kelson, that I was moved to tears. It was so great. And then to have that ridiculous nonsense at the end. I'm sorry, go ahead, Getty.
Oh, no, sorry. I think it was 28 minutes later that's what.
Oh, very good. Okay, so Miguel says, in the second film, the virus is nearly contained by letting the infected starve. So why are they still infected 20 years later? Another great question. But we're going to end on the best comment of the evening so far from Twitch. I could not think. Okay, best viewers on streamboo.com. Remove the space. There you go, everybody. There you go.
I love Bob. He an alpha.
That guy always comes.
He's swinging.
Yes. Oh, wow. You swing for the fences, as they say. Okay, that's everybody. Right. We're going to go ahead and conclude this. I'm sure we'll be back talking about this next year, whenever the sequel comes out. If it's already filmed, I imagine. They announced
28 it's going to be later?
Yes. Huh? In fact, on Monday, they said that the sequel is coming out 28 weeks after, from, I think, June 23rd.
Wow.
They did an announcement on Bloody Disgusting or something. Here, wait.
So wait, 28, that's like a half a year. So are we 28 weeks later. So that's like, are we looking at a Christmas movie or January or something?
Christmas or January. Yeah. I think
28 years later for good.
Seville. That's all I have to say.
You get the Alpha Yule log. Anyway, there we go.
Jimmy
Savile's Christmas magic, everybody. All right.
That's mistletoe. Okay, there we go.
28 years later.
Yikes. All right. So this has been 28 years later. Thank you everybody for watching this and for watching the movie, hopefully before you watch this show. Otherwise, yikes. But yes, as always, I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Jeff York of the establishingshot.org and Pipeline Artists. We have Dave Canfield, the Creature Feature Preacher, Katie Glidewell, the Blonde in Front, Mark the Movement Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room Podcast. We, of course, had Mike Crowley, if you'll probably agree, who had to jump because we went over time. Sorry about that, Mike. Please follow all of Earth's Mightiest Critics. Their information is down below. Kicking the Seat now has a Patreon if you want to check that out. The information will be down below because I didn't get to put it in before the show. But you can do that if you so choose or not. It's greatly appreciated either way, just checking it out. And speaking of checking things out, next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, join us back right here because we're going to be talking about, yes, I'm saying it. You're not going to believe me until you see it, but you have to see it this weekend. One of the best films of the year. F1, starring Brad Pitt, Javier Bardem.
Really?
Carrie Condon. Yes, it is an experience, and it's an IMAX experience. Now, I've had issues with IMAX movies ever since they took their glorious Navy Pier screen, the last genuine IMAX, I feel like, in the state, away from us a few years ago. So now we've had to deal with these Limax screens, which are big-ish, but they're not the big deal. But if you have an IMAX screen near you, go see F1 on IMAX. It was built for this. It's genuinely thrilling, except for there's one British actor. I know it's a stereotype, but sometimes stereotypes are there for a reason. Close-ups of his mouth when he's speaking, the teeth. 100 feet tall. No good. But go see the movie and join us back here for a spoilerific conversation of F1 next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. And thank you all, friends and fellow critics out. I really appreciate your time here. So we're going to go, and I'll see you much sooner than 28 years later. Yeah.
Stay